Hello and welcome to this class on HTML fundamentals. My name is Matt Milner and I'm going to be guiding you through this course. In this first module we're going to talk about HTML and how it fits into the World Wide Web. We'll talk a little bit about the HTML history and then focus on what an HTML document is and some of the root elements and things that we need to be concerned about. And finally we'll talk a little bit about HTML and browsers and how these two interact. As we look at a little bit of history for HTML, we know, of course, that the internet was created by Al Gore. Now, I'm joking, of course. Al Gore was a big supporter of the internet and gave a lot of support to different elements that helped it along. It's an off misquoted statement, a little bit of humor to get us started here. But the reality is we have the internet, however we got there, that allows different computers to be connected. And this includes all sorts of things like TCP/IP, DNS, and name resolution, and IP addresses, all that good low-level stuff that allows the computers to be connected. And it was all generated back for defense so they could connect their computers and share information. Now on top of that, we had the World Wide Web, which was essentially created by this man, Tim Berners-Lee. And the web, the World Wide Web, is actually made up of a few different things. One, of course, is our focus here, is HTML. And HTML is the language that we use to create documents that we want to share across the World Wide Web, or more appropriately, across the internet. We want to share these documents using this underlying network topology. Another piece of that is the notion of a universal resource identifier or a universal resource locator, the URI or URL. You can see here down by our document we have an address for a particular HTML document. That's a big piece of the web, is being able to go out and use an address to get a particular document that we're interested in. And finally, if we watch our HTML document, we have the HTTP protocol, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which is all about taking those documents and exchanging them. It layers on top of the internet protocols and provides us a language for exchanging these documents. So HTML, Hypertext Markup Language, HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Now Pluralsight has excellent courses already on TCP/IP. We've got courses on HTTP, so if you want to find out more about those lower level protocols, you can do that. In this course we're going to focus on HTML, or the language that we use to create these documents we share over the internet. HTML documents, so the whole idea of the World Wide Web, was created with the intent of being able to share documents, essentially research documents that people had created, and they wanted to be able to have text, have data in them, images, charts, those sorts of things. And importantly, they wanted them to be able to be linked together so that I could create a research document, and if I were referencing someone else's work, I could just have you follow a link to that person's document on the World Wide Web and see that information as well. So it's a big piece of it. I wanted the ability to create these rich documents, but also they should all be linked together. It should be a web of information. And HTML really is what's known as a markup language. We're going to create our documents, mark them up with these tags or this meta information, and then it's meant to be processed by a client application. Today we think of that almost exclusively as a browser, internet browser like Internet Explorer, Chrome, Firefox, the Safari browser. And so what we're going to focus on in this course is creating that markup and how the various elements and tags that we use are interpreted by the browsers to give us the document that we want to share with people. So a simple example, we look at this markup here. See, there are a lot of things that are really instructions to the client, saying this is an HTML document, here's the body, and I have an H1 or a first level heading called semantic web, with the idea that you're not going to see those tags or those elements, that markup, that's going to be used by the client in order to display your data. So we have the semantic web here. Obviously, this page has a lot more markup behind it, but the idea is similar, that we're going to provide this markup and a client is going to interpret it. If we look at an HTML document, we've got a very simple example here. We have at the top a doc type. And the doc type is a declaration in your document of which version of the HTML standard you're following. So here you can see we're following the HTML4 where we have the strict in there. There are a variety of different document standards that you can follow, including XHTML, which is HTML4, but all documents are valid XML documents as well. So we'll look at that in a moment. So the doc type is there, tells any client which standard we're following. We follow that by an HTML root element, which is our single top-level element that's going to wrap our document. All of our other pieces are going to be contained inside of that. We have the head, and the head or header is really where we're going to provide a lot of metadata, almost exclusively used by the clients or the browsers. So we'll provide information as here we've got the title, we can provide metadata, we can provide links to related documents, be those style sheets, script. If we're talking about a document with many pages, we might be linking to a previous or next page as well. So all that information can be used by the browser, but with the exception of title, you almost never see that information represented in the page. And finally, of course, we have the body. This is where we put our document data. This is what the user is going to see. This is where the bulk of our markup happens, and where we focus on the information that we want to present to the user. In order to show you the use of the doc type, I'm going to create a simple HTML document here, about as simple as I can get. And I could put a head, a body. So this is just simple. We'll call this our hello world. And this is about as basic as we can get. And you'll notice I have the HTML, the head and the body. If I now go open that, you'll notice that Chrome, the Google browser, is perfectly happy to display that hello world. It understands that. If I open that up with another browser, say Firefox, it's also perfectly happy to render that. Now the issue here is that those browsers are having to guess at what standard I'm following, which version of HTML or XHTML I'm using here, and they're having to render based on that guess. I don't know about you, but I don't like my tools in software or my computer tools to guess. I want them to know what they're doing. And so one of the things that we can do with the doc type is we can tell the browser, the client, this is the standard that I'm following. So if we switch here over to Chrome, we look at the w3.org for the valid DTD list, you'll see that we've got templates here. And we can also go through and see that there are a variety of different standards that we could be following. Now the most common are going to be the HTML 4.01 or XHTML. Those are the most common ones today. You can see there's a variety of others. HTML5 is out there. It's not yet a standard, but they do have a doc type that you use for that. And then there's some other things like MathML and other SVG related declarations. But if we take this same HTML now, we'll just copy that. We'll paste it in here. And we can see we've got a number of different items in here. We've got the title that's in there as standard. So we could say hello HTML is our title. And then we've got the body, and we'll change that to our hello world. We can save that. Again, of course, the browser is perfectly happy. It doesn't look any different than what we had before. But if we go out to the markup validation service, so validator.w3.org, what we can do is validate by direct input. And we'll take our content here, paste that in, and check it. You see it was successfully checked as XHTML10.strict. It is going to tell me that it's assuming the encoding here based on what we've put in the tags. So what happens if, for example, we come in and take out the P and we revalidate? Well, you can see now, because it understands that we're trying to follow this standard, this XHTML1 strict, it's going to give us an error and tell us that we can't put just plain text inside the body. We need to wrap that with some sort of element, a div tag or a p tag or paragraph tag. And so that document type declaration is your contract with the client that says, I'm following this particular standard. These are the items that you can expect from me. Now, again, there are many different standards out there we can follow or that we can use in terms of document type declarations. Even for HTML4, you can see we have a strict, a transitional, and a frame set. Likewise for XHTML. The strict means we're going to follow only those items that are actually in the standard and have not been deprecated. So there are several items that have been deprecated in there that you'll want to avoid if you're following the strict. Whereas the transitional or loose means that you're following it, but you also might be using some of those items that have been deprecated. And frame set is when you're not just going to include a body. Inside your HTML, you're going to have a frame set or a series of frames, each one pointing to a separate HTML document or containing its own content. XHTML is a revision of the HTML standard which follows the guidelines of XML. So for example, one of the things you could do in HTML is you could leave the P off and the closing tag and simply have the hello world. If we switch over to the validator and we try that, we can put just the start tag in. We'll revalidate and see that we still get a warning, we still get an error that the end tag is omitted. So when we're using the XHTML, this also has to be valid XML, which means that we have to have open and closing tags for all those items. So now I can revalidate that. So it's important to put that doc type at the top of your file. It lets the client know which standard you're following. It's also important to follow that standard to make sure that your HTML that you're sending down is going to be rendered properly. And that's what it all comes down to with this doc type. The browsers will do their best. As we saw, it'll try to render things even if it doesn't have the doc type. But it's better to be sure to tell the browser this is a standard I'm following and then follow that standard. Whatever HTML editing tool you choose, as long as it's not something like Notepad here, you will most likely get that kind of guidance from a tool. A Visual Studio or another HTML editing tool is going to show you where you have errors, where you're not following the document type that you've declared at the top. The head element, as I described, is primarily about metadata, information that the browser will use but not necessarily display to the user. And one exception to that is the title. This is where you put the title of your document. And this element often gets displayed in the tab or the window bar of the browser, and also is used a bit in search engine optimization. So search engines, as they're looking at documents, will look at the title to see if it's relevant and to harvest that information. The meta tag, which you can have many of, allows you to specify metadata about the document. This might be keywords or descriptions and things of that nature. Can also be the equivalent of HTTP headers. So you can have information in there as well that might normally be at the protocol level. But typically you'll use this for those keywords, for information about the author and the description and those sorts of things, such that the browser can use them, but often they won't be displayed. Also have the script element where we can specify inline script, usually JavaScript, to allow you to create interactive pages and manipulate your markup after it's been rendered. I have the style element, which allows you to create inline style definitions using cascading style sheets. This allows you to apply to the body elements different styles such as positioning, colors, alignment, those sorts of elements. And we have a whole course on styles, cascading style sheets, where you can get more information on that. And we have courses, several different courses on JavaScript if you want to learn more about creating interactive pages. We also have the link element. This is where we can tell the client that there are other documents related to this one. And so the link will have both a relationship that might say it's the previous document or page, it's the next page or the contents. Uh, Often this gets used for linking in those style sheets and scripts as they've been created in external files. This allows those styles and those scripts to be reused across pages and gives you a nice separation of your markup file that has your data and information in it and your styling and interaction and scripting in separate files. So the link will often pull those in. We also have a base element, and this really provides for the browser an indication of what the base URI or URL is for any links in the page that are relative. So a link might say, I'm a link to first.html. Well, what's the base address for that particular item? If it's not specified here, the browser will make some assumptions based on what the current address of the document is, but you can use the base tag to give it a specific base address you want it to use for all those relative links.